Welcome back. In this shorter module, we are going to practice manipulating data. So everything that we did in lessons 11 and 12, we are going to combine that into one big mega practice session. Let's get started. So this is the only module thus far where we have only had one segment, and that is because I had originally planned on making lessons 11 and 12 one session, but it ended up being so big we had to break it up into two. So this guy, he's going to be a little bit shorter than normal, 23 minutes, but since we went a little over last time, I figure it's going to make it average out for you. Okay, so here we go. We have a big example here. So we have 6 different parts. We're going to be using the city bike trips data, and we're going to find the following. First, we're going to find the difference between the start and stop time in minutes, and convert the output to a string. So that's going to be a two-parter. First, you got to find the difference, then you got to convert it. 2, we're going to use safe divide to convert trip duration into minutes and use a floor function. Okay. So again, same thing. First, you got to safe divide, then use the floor function. 3, find the difference between the start and stop latitude, start and stop station latitude, and round the output to 3 decimals. 4, add a leading 0 to the birth year. 5, make gender uppercase. 6, keep only the last 3 characters of user type. And for all of these, we're going to filter our data for start station names that contain or have Madison in the name. So it can be in the front, the back, anywhere in the middle. Go ahead, pause your screen, take a crack at this. If you find yourself where you're like, oh, I'm not doing this right, or this isn't working, take a look back at the reference sheets for the string and math tool belts that we built together in the past 2 lessons. If that doesn't help you, go ahead and try and Google the answer. One of the biggest skills that you learn in coding is how to find answers for yourself, because in the job, you're not always going to have someone that can just tell you how to do it. You have to figure it out. So if you have to spend some time searching and Googling, don't think of it as a waste of time. This is you practicing how to be a data analyst. So anyway, off my soapbox. Pause the video. When you're ready, we'll come back and we'll go through the answers together. Okay, so we have a lot of problems to work with. So we're going to use our city bike trips data, and we want to find the following. Find the difference between start and stop time in minutes, and then convert that output to a string. Use safe divide to convert trip duration into minutes and use a floor function. Find the difference between start and stop latitude and round the output to 3 decimals. Add a leading 0 to birth year. Make gender uppercase. Keep only the last 3 characters of user type. And for all of these, we're going to filter our data for start station name that has Madison somewhere in it. Okay. So let's start with select from our table. And let's look at all of the columns that we need. I'll keep my limit on there just in case. So we want start and stop time. And if you had forgotten what that was called, we can always pull up the schema, but these are pretty straightforward, so we're lucky. So we can just say select start time, comma, stop time. Okay, so that gets rid of 1. Trip duration. Okay, that's just called trip duration. Great. Trip duration. Start and stop latitude. Okay, so we're going to have to do start station latitude and end station latitude. Start station latitude, end station latitude. Okay. We want to have birth year. Okay, again, that's just called birth year. Birth underscore year. Gender. We need to make gender uppercase. and then keep only the last 3 characters of user type, and that's just user type. Okay. And then since we want the start station names that have Madison in it, I'm going to put that in here just for right now, just so we can make sure that our filter works. Start station name. Okay, so now that we have all of our columns in our select statement, we have our from statement where we're getting our data, we have our handy dandy limit on, let's put in this filter. So we want to filter our data for start station names that have Madison in it. So whenever you're looking for something that it contains, you think like, where start station name like what? Like Madison. But Google BigQuery is case sensitive. So if you typed Madison all uppercase like I have it in the description, if you had it like this, you're gonna get a big fat womp womp, nothing. So what we could do is we could say where upper station name. So then we're making our station name all capital, and then we're saying make start station name completely capitalized, and then find anything that has Madison capitalized. But if you didn't do that and you just had it spelled with an uppercase M and the rest lowercase, that's fine too. As long as you pulled back data, you did it right. Okay, so here we see we have Madison right in the middle, so we know that our wildcard search worked. Start time, stop time, trip duration, da-da-da-da-da. Okay. So now that we've done that, let's work on problem 1. Find the difference between the start and stop time in minutes, and then convert the output to a string. So we're going to break this one by one. Let's first find the difference in stop and start time. And to do that, we can do date diff. And we want to do the end minus the start. If you do it the other way, you're going to get negative time, and that doesn't make any sense. So stop time, comma, start time. And then with the date diff, we need to say, how do we want it expressed? And we want it expressed in minutes. And I got an error because it said a date part is required, but I put minutes, so I think it's just minute. And then I get the green check mark. Great. And we're going to call this as total time. If you had forgotten what the function was, if you had forgotten like, oh, I need to find the difference in the time, you can always go to just search Google BigQuery date functions. And then it's the first link that pops up on Google, and then it has all the different ones listed, and you would see very quickly you could get the date diff, or you could even do date subtract. But let's go back. Okay, so now we have this as total time. So let's run this and see what it looks like. So we have 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 17 minutes. You'll notice that this trip duration, which is expressed in seconds, you're like, oh, well, if it's 10 minutes, and that should be 300 seconds. Well, that's because when you do date diff, it's going to round it to the nearest unit. So either to the nearest hour, the nearest minute, the nearest second. So this trip duration, he's a little bit more exact. Okay, so that was the first part. Now we need to convert the output to a string. To do that, we use cast. So what we're gonna do is we already have our date diff. We're just gonna wrap this guy in a cast statement. So we're just going to do cast parentheses space as string close parentheses. And what you might have wanted to do is maybe you want to keep each one here. Maybe you want to do it like this. Time A. Okay. This way we can compare and make sure that it looks like the string. So we see in total time A, it's considered a number. It's all the way on the right-hand side. And we know that numbers, they go from right to left, and then strings go from left to right. And then we can see that here with our total time. So if you are getting these types of numbers and it's adjusted on the left side of the column, then you did it right. So let's get rid of this first one here. And I'll put a note in. Answer to part 1. Okay. Next, we're going to use safe divide to convert trip duration into minutes and use a floor function. Okay, so now that we have our total time in minutes, now we're going to flip trip duration into minutes, and then we'll use a floor function. So to do that, we do safe divide trip duration. So trip duration is going to be on the top, and then we're going to divide it by 60 seconds in a minute, as trip duration minutes. And let's run that. And I always like to do this one by one because you see here, since we're just applying math, and we talked about this earlier in our previous module, is that now we can just spot check this. So I see I have 426, and when I divided it by 60, I got 7.1. Well, let me use my calculator. What does calculator say? I hope he says that. 426 divided by 60. 7.1. Perfect. And then let's just try one more just for fun. 632 divided by 60. Great. Looks good. So this is whenever you're doing any kind of math, any kind of thing like that, it's nice if you kind of build it piece by piece by piece instead of doing everything all at once, because it can be harder to trace back and see if you're making any errors. Okay, so now that we have our safe divide, let's put in our floor function underneath. So I put floor, parentheses, and then let's just copy paste this guy right inside. So what we're going to expect to happen, is that in our trip duration minutes, we're going to have all of these fractions. We are going to expect the floor as trip duration floor. We're going to expect this guy to go down to whatever number is here. So if it's 7.95, he's going to be 7. Let's try. Okay, so now we have our total time. This is when we did the date diff, and that uses normal rounding conventions. And it uses normal rounding conventions, and I don't know to which decimal point it goes to, because I can see here we have 10.5. I was expecting this guy to go to 11, but he stayed at 10. But then I see down here I have 2.55, and he went up to 3. So maybe they look at 2 decimal places. I would think that's what it is. Okay, so now we did floor of our safe divide. So 7.1 should be 7, 10.5 should be 10, 7.95 should be 7. Fabulous. Okay, so now this one is answer to part 2. And I'm going to get rid of trip duration in minutes just to clean up our space. Find the difference between start and stop latitude and round to 3 decimals. Okay? I'm also going to delete my start and stop time again just to kind of clean up my space. So here we have start and end latitude. So we're going to do end station latitude minus start station latitude as latitude diff. And I get my green check mark, so I'm good to go. So let's run this. And okay, so I see I have this number, 40.76 minus 40.75, and I get a difference of this very small amount. And if I were to pull up my calculator again, 40.7599 minus 40.7630. And I get negative 0.0031. And I can see that's the same thing here, negative 0.0031. So I feel pretty good about this guy. But that's not all we needed to do. We wanted to find the difference and round the output to 3 decimal places. Now we're doing this rounding just for giving you some practice with it. In general, you never really want to round a latitude and longitude because the purpose of having latitude and longitude is to be very, very specific. And if you're rounding your latitude, even to 100th or 1,000th decimal place, that can actually make a pretty big difference on the map. So don't do this in real life, but we are doing this for practice. Okay, so we're going to do round the difference, and we're going to put a 3. We want 3 decimal places. I'm going to call this lat diff round. And voila. Okay, so I can see that these are all rounded to 3 decimal places. Great. So this was the answer to number. So this is the answer to number 3. So I'm going to get rid of my start stop latitude. Answer to part 3. Our next one is to add a leading 0 to birth year. So to add this leading 0 is actually a little bit more complicated than you would think. So first what we need to do is we need to transform birth year from a number into a string. Because if you remember, LPAD, it can only pad strings. We can't pad numbers. So let's just break it down and say, let's do birth year as a string. So cast birth year as string. As birth year string. And let's run this. Okay, great. And the same thing like we saw with the total time. We see our regular birth year, he's a number, he's starts on the right side, but then when we turn him to a string, he goes to the left. So we feel good about that. So now that we know how to make birth year a string, now we can add in our leading 0 with our LPAD. So we do LPAD, and what are we padding? We're padding this guy, who's a string. Stick him right in here. How many digits do we want him to be? Well, he's 4 right now, but we want him to be 5. And if there's anything less than 5, we want you to put in a 0 as birth year LPAD. Okay, voila. So here we have birth year string, birth year LPAD, and if there's a missing, we just leave it as missing. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this guy, and whoop, I definitely don't want to leave. I want to stay here. Get rid of this guy, and this is answer to part 4. Oh. Oh. Okay, let's get rid of birth year here. Okay, 5, make gender uppercase. This is going to be easy. We already kind of did it here with station name, but even if it's easy, sometimes it's good to just always go through the same motions until you get really, really good at it. Because sometimes you're like, oh, I got this, and then you do it, and that's when you make mistakes. So I have gender up here, and then I'm just going to make him uppercase and put him right below. And make sure it looks okay. So here's our regular gender. This is what we started with, and this is what we turned it into. Perfect. So now I can get rid of this one and put in here answer to part 5. And the last one, keep only the last 3 characters of user type. Okay? So there's really no reason to do this other than I asked you to. Actually, it probably would have made more sense to keep the first 3. But to keep the last 3, you can do either your right, you can do either your left, or you can do your right. If you start with your right, then you move in. So if you want to get the last of something, you do right. If you want to get the first of something, you start left. So we want to keep the last 3 characters of user type. So we have user type here, right under him. I'm going to do right user type. And then how many do I want to keep? I want to keep 3. as last 3 user type. And there you go. So we see we have subscriber, and then it just turns into BER. And then this is answer to part 6. Okay, fabulous. If you did these examples and they felt a little difficult, that's okay. This is not supposed to be super easy. If it did feel really easy, then that's great. That means that you're really picking it up and maybe you can move a little bit faster through the course. In general, with these types of examples and problems, you want to, if you're getting somewhere between the 70 to 90% correct, that's a really good spot to be in. Because if it's too easy, then the class is too easy. But if it's too hard and you're not getting any of it right, then that means maybe you need to go back and refresh yourself. But if you're getting most of it there and it's just, oh, I forgot this, I forgot that, all that means is you need a little bit more practice. And everybody needs practice. So don't get hard on yourself if it felt like this was a hair too difficult. You can always go back and try it again. So with that, let's jump back to the PowerPoint and wrap up this lesson. All right, so very quickly, we practiced using various string manipulations and techniques, the LPAD, cast, upper and left, and various math functions, floor, safe, divide, and round. In the next couple modules that are coming up, we're going to start introducing some kind of new concepts. We're going to move away from the data formatting and the math, and we're going to look at logical conditions, which is a really fun part of coding, but if you're not used to it, it can feel a little overwhelming. So just preparing yourself, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a little different. So I'm excited to go through that with you, and I'll see you in our next lesson.